Why did Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine under Joe Biden and not under Donald Trump? A question that was even brought up by Bill Maher. I know for the most part, it seems like it has very little to do with the subject matter of this video, but I think it has a lot to do with it. See, I think Vladimir Putin saw, for one, weakness in the presidency, but I think he also saw that the United States has a very serious malignancy within it. We are being devoured by it. We are being torn apart. I think that people who watch videos like this, I think people like you, for the most part, have a genuine interest in the well-being of this country, of its people, of people in general. If you take a look at Jonathan Haidt's research on moral foundations, there are 6. And you can see that conservatives have all 6 moral foundations in varying degrees. So these includes things like care, fairness, authority, loyalty, liberty, etc. The left only has care and fairness. This is the only moral foundations they tend to display. And what I do find absolutely hilarious is that libertarians only have 1. Liberty. No joke. Libertarians are like, don't care. Freedom. I'm like, all right. Well, I certainly think you need a little bit of like sanctity, in there. I think sanctity is one of the moral foundations. Basically, like, we uphold a variety of moral values for the sake of the betterment of the world, for each other. We want to maximize good. We want to maximize growth and sustainability. We want to make sure we're not destroying the planet. We do. But we don't want to be lied to for some person's political agenda to manipulate and steal power. Vladimir Putin knows that we are in serious trouble because this malignancy within the U.S. has grown so powerful, it can put Joe Biden in the presidency. Take a look at this story from the Daily Mail. Now on to the main subject. BLM activist named Bostonian of the Year, whose nonprofit raised $1 million, is charged with squandering much of it on rent arrears, $1,200 hotel stay, and meals at Bubba Gump Shrimp Co. Well, I mean, come on, Bubba Gump Shrimp's awesome. And Shake Shack, also awesome, after being arrested at her $450,000 home. So this is a BLM activist who was praised and celebrated as this great leader, now being charged along with her husband on an 18-count indictment with wire fraud, conspiracy, and making false statements to a mortgage lending business. When I first read this story, I said, let's be real. I mean, is this legitimate? Is this BLM activist actually doing things wrong? Because I want to tell you about something. Somebody who's got a nonprofit and brings in donations, they're allowed to go to Bubba Gump Shrimp. I mean, I don't think it's moral necessarily, but if you have a business and as part of your business, you go out to eat at fancy restaurants, okay. Suppose the issue arises when you're more of a nonprofit, but big nonprofits do this all the time. So I saw this and I'm like, are they singling out this BLM lady? Because I got to tell you, man, big nonprofits do way worse. And the reality is, no, you don't give these people the benefit of the doubt. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt. This lady was just transferring money to her bank account. That's right. A BLM activist indicted on fraud charges. Am I at all surprised? Now, I'm a proponent of innocent until proven guilty because that's one of the strengths of our country. So I want to see some evidence, right? You can't just come out and say she did these things. And that's why I'm like, even though I'm not a fan of these people who incite riots, who burn down cities and cause damage and all that stuff, I still think the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. They say both have made more than $100,000 in pandemic-related unemployment benefits, while Ken Grant also made $33,426 in diversity consulting fees. Wait, she's getting unemployment benefits related to the pandemic, but also bringing in donations. So we got questions. I look forward to seeing the state prove their case. But in a story like this, I have to wonder, grifter, right? That's what they say about people on the right, of people like Dave Rubin, of people like me, of people like Joe Rogan. Oh, he's trapped by audience capture. He's brought in so many people, on the right that he's got this right-wing audience he has to cater to, and it's just insane. So I look at stories like this, and I think to myself, certainly this weakness can be seen by other countries. Now we've got Iran firing, reportedly, firing it was a missile strike, I believe, on near the U.S. consulate in Iraq. You've got China making bold moves with Saudi Arabia, potentially to do deals, oil deals in yuan. Russia obviously invading Ukraine, because the U.S. is on the verge of falling off its pedestal and being unable to do anything about what's happening in the world. I don't like the idea of the U.S. as the world police, don't get me wrong. I liked the idea of securing our borders, having a good level of international trade and relations, which Trump absolutely was doing. I mean, man, yeah, let's be real about this. Trump was not an isolationist. Trump was America first. You got to put your own oxygen mask before you put the mask on somebody else. So secure our borders, bring our jobs back, have a healthy, stable American population. But he did negotiate the USMCA. He was negotiating trade deals. This wasn't isolationism. He did fire missiles on Syria. Not a fan. So it was a good balance of trying to restore strength to the United States, but not militaristic might necessarily, although Trump very much is a fan of that, but just stability in work and things like that. Well, this malignancy in the U.S. was able to rip him from that seat. And I think it greatly benefits Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, et cetera, et cetera. So I wonder about the future of this country. The past couple of weeks have been strange in terms of news. And, you know, I've been seeing a lot of people talk about how it seems slow or seems weird. And I'm like, definitely. Interest seems to be down. People are just burned out a bit. And it comes and goes in waves, right? Especially the weather's getting warm and it's just like, you know, man, let me go outside and just relax a little bit. But I have to wonder about the timing of the conflicts and everything that's happening. And I wake up in the morning and I just kind of think maybe regular people are really just burned out from hearing the same old story over and over and over again. And I mean, it's worrying, to be completely honest. We've got a major war. We've got massive funding going overseas and people are just like, I can't take it anymore. I wonder if the culture war will end not with a bang, but with a whimper, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of people talk about peaceful divorce. They talk about, civil war, for instance. I know I do. And I think it's fair to say that we're in a civil war, as I often do, and we're in a world war. But people want those phrases to represent historical conflict. They don't, right? World War II, the Great War, World War I, the Great War, right? It's because it was war on an industrial scale. It was something we've never seen before. So when people talked about war before, they were like, we're not going to have it. People are going to be fighting, on the hillside. And then all of a sudden it was like planes and blitzkriegs and zeppelins, and it was something they'd never experienced. It was very, very different. Warfare today is also very, very different. In terms of civil war, culture war, etc., stories like this, I wonder about the malignancy in the U.S. because certainly at this point, any sane, rational person, any real human being who has the capability to understand simple concepts would see a story like this and say, I am tired of being scammed. Shall we go through the list again, my friends? It all started with Trayvon Martin. The story was that a white man attacked, Trayvon over some Skittles or whatever. The real story was that a Hispanic man saw someone walking through the backyard of several residential buildings and was suspicious. Trayvon Martin put him on the ground and started beating him. A fight breaks out. Don't get me wrong. You can criticize George Zimmerman all day and night for sure for confronting this guy. But it wasn't what the media narrative was. It wasn't a white man who just shot and killed some kid. It was a guy on the ground being pummeled, and he was Hispanic. Then we got Michael Brown. Hands up, don't shoot, they said. Well, that was a lie. I mean, it was Obama's Department of Justice or Attorney General, it was Eric Holder. And they said, based on where the shots entered this man's body, he was not standing there with his hands up. They lied again. And it's just lie after lie over and over again. Just consistently. We got George Floyd. There's a debate there. Don't get me wrong. I look at the George Floyd story and I'm just like, Chauvin, he showed up after the struggle with George Floyd. George Floyd was on drugs. It's a complicated narrative. It's a complicated story. George Floyd was sitting in a vehicle behind the wheel, chewing on a speedball. I mean, that's what is it, meth and fentanyl? We don't want somebody doing drugs operating a vehicle like that, so the cops took him out. George Floyd fought with the police. They put him on the ground at his request. But let's be real. I think it is a fair point from many. And I've made the point as well. Once the police have you in custody, they're responsible for your well-being. If the cops suspect you of doing drugs, then they want to assume responsibility for that, which they should, then they got to call an ambulance right away. As soon as they noticed this dude was suspected of doing drugs or something like that, they should have called an ambulance in and said, we got a guy, and they maybe could have saved his life. I don't think anybody should have died in any of these circumstances. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, I'm sad to see any of them lose their lives. But once again, the story was a lie. It turns out that there's a variety of narrative. There's a nuance in the narrative around the police use of force. I do think there's a question of improper police behavior and not checking on George Floyd and kneeling on him, whether it was his neck or his shoulder or otherwise. But then we go to Ahmaud Arbery. Once again, the great lie. And it's fascinating because in this instance of the Ahmaud Arbery lie, you get people like Tulsi Gabbard, who I believe, I'm pretty sure, it's been a minute, but she even comes out and says it was the proper ruling. She's wrong. You even get people on Fox News saying it was a proper ruling. Wrong. All these conservatives coming out willing, just desperate to virtue signal because of the Kyle Rittenhouse story. Once again, another lie. Kyle Rittenhouse did not cross state lines with a firearm to hunt anybody down. Kyle Rittenhouse was in his own neighborhood because he lived in the suburbs, basically, of Kenosha, and his family lived in Kenosha. His friend gave him a weapon, and he fled for his life and only fired after someone else fired first. What did the media say? A young white supremacist went and killed several black people. It was a lie. Once again, a lie. It was just not true. I mean, honorable mention, Jussie Smollett, dude's already freaking out in jail. At least that guy went to jail. But how many of these stories need to happen before people finally say Black Lives Matter is a criminal institution that publishes lies, manipulations, and propaganda for personal gain? Maybe a little bold of me to say, to be completely honest. But Black Lives Matter started, my understanding, it's been a minute again, with Trayvon Martin. A lie. Remember, I think a major mainstream news organization, we'll leave it at that, edited the 911 call to make it seem like George Zimmerman was racist. I am not joking about that. George Zimmerman called the police and said, you know, there's a guy here and he looks suspicious. And they said, what does he look like? And he's like, you know, so tall, he's wearing a hoodie. And they said, what's his race? And he says, I think he's black. The news organization cuts all that out. So all you hear Zimmerman say is, there's a suspicious guy here, I think he's black. To make it seem like George Zimmerman was some racist white guy. It's crazy. And then the media didn't even show you that Zimmerman had contusions on his face. He had visible injuries when the police brought him in. And the police said it was self-defense. Clearly, the dude's injured. Kid was on top of him. I'm sad to hear that anybody lost their life. Don't get into fights with people. Any fight you can avoid is a fight you've won. That story I like to tell. It's a video where like this Taekwondo master or whatever, he's like, I'm going to show you all the ultimate move. The one move that guarantees you will win every fight. And then he has the guy stand in front of him and they, get in their stance. And the instructor just runs away, arms flailing as a joke. Everyone laughs. And he comes in and he says, that's the point. Any fight you can avoid is the fight you've won. Don't fight people for some kind of sense of personal pride or whatever. Fight to protect yourself. Anyway, I digress. How many stories do we have to have that this keeps happening? Now, again, I want to make sure I stress the point. Monica Cannon Grant, innocent until proven guilty. For sure. But to a certain degree, I'd just be like, maybe they're scamming us. Maybe the media has been lying the whole time. And this malignancy of leftist grifter cult garbage is burning this country to the ground. Now, truth be told, I think many of these people enjoy it, want it, because from the ashes of the old, they shall build anew. There's a funny meme. I follow Political Compass memes on Instagram. I think it's funny. And if you're not familiar with the Political Compass, you have the authoritarian left, authoritarian right, libertarian left, libertarian right. And it showed each of the quadrant personalities, like a guy, communist guy, in each of their quadrant looking down at something talking about civil war. And they're all saying, I can't wait until society collapses so I can rebuild it, in my image or whatever. Everybody seems to think that once this country falls apart, it's their side that's going to win. You have no idea. Truth be told, it tends to be the fascists who win. Yes, no, seriously. If you look at history, Noam Chomsky, I'll throw it out to him. He said in the arena of violence, the most brutal guy wins, and that is not us. Well, Antifa wants to start some violence. Black Lives Matter wants to start some violence. But you know what? If they push us to the brink of civil war, I'll tell you who wins. First of all, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. then all of a sudden, you'll have questions about who in the United States will actually gain any kind of dominance. Now, I think right now, for the most part, the urban liberal types, they are the people who want to control you and everything, even if you don't live where they live. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the mountains. How does it make sense that in Maryland, for instance, so I live in West Virginia, but our studio's in Maryland because it's like right next to the river. How does it make sense that Baltimore has very serious crime problems? So they say, if you live in the mountains, if you live in Western Maryland in the Blue Ridge Mountains, you can't have a gun. Okay, well, hold on there a minute. We got bears out here. Now, granted, I don't want to go out and shoot bears, but I think if you were like walking around in the mountains and you saw a bear, you'd be a lot happier if you had one. Now, in West Virginia, we got constitutional carry, and I'm a resident of West Virginia. West Virginia is substantially better in many ways, and we're currently building out the new property, new space, and everything, so it's going to be a heckin' good time. Maryland's a pretty bad state when it comes to gun rights. There's some okay things about it, and I only say that because relative to like New Jersey and New York, but for the most part, it's a fairly bad state with a bunch of laws that make literally no sense. Like, why is it that, you know, let's see, like what's the I'm forgetting the name. There's let's just put it this way: you can have a semi-auto shotgun that can hold 6 shells, as long as there's no pistol grip. You could have a KSG 25 double mag tube, 25 shell holding pump action shotgun with a pistol grip, but it can't be semi-auto. And so I'm just like, well, I don't. This makes no sense. It's absurdity. These laws are random and make no sense. Constitutional carry makes sense. Have a gun. There you go. A lot of the federal laws make no sense. But so my main point is, it's these people who follow Black Lives Matter, who hold their fist up, the communist fist, the red salute, and don't know its history. And then later they come out and they're like, it's just a symbol of resistance. I love that. That was Ethan Klein, my friends. Ethan Klein of H3 Podcast. He quote tweeted me because I made a joke about Zelensky of Ukraine holding up the fist, doing the red salute. And I said, I didn't know if he was supporting communism or Black Lives Matter. I was joking. It was meant to be a joke. Granted, he did do the red salute. And Klein was like, he's accusing him of being a communist for holding up the sign of the international sign of resistance. Resistance, bro. Amazon.com. Jeff Bezos, American oligarch, is propping up that message with that fist. I certainly don't think siding with the U.S. government and Amazon puts you on the side of resistance. Unless you're like resisting the resistance or whatever. Bro, you're the establishment. You're the corpos. You're the fascists. It's remarkable. But this is the issue. No matter how many times you see stories like this, Defiant L's, shout out, by the way. No matter how many times you see stories like this, you still have people claiming they're the good guys. And that's the malignancy I'm talking about. At what point can we sit back and just be like, hey, these people are lying to us? At what point do you say, I am done being lied to? Jussie Smollett is in jail right now, and you still believe these stories. Let me throw out shout out this tweet from Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh says, so actually, let me slow down. There's a tweet from Andy No. This school is filled with a bunch of slur, get out or else. Racist graffiti at Our Lady of Mercy High School in Rochester, New York, sparks rage. Matt Walsh says, of course it was a hoax. These things are always hoaxes, always, like 100% of the time with no exceptions in recent memory. Andy No says, I struggle to think of a recent case of racist graffiti, online threats, or unwitnessed assault allegations at schools or higher education campuses being true, actually. You ready for this? This individual on Twitter says, sounds like you just don't want to see it. This happened multiple times at Emory. Linking to a story, Teach In Against Hate to respond to recent anti-Semitic graffiti. Andy No says, the suspect is a black man in the swastika graffiti incident you just cited. A hoax. Remember when there was that former, I think, NFL player who had a pizza restaurant and I think like a chicken restaurant or something like that, and someone ransacked it and wrote racial slurs? Turned out it was him. How many stories do we need like this? So there are a bunch of websites that actually tracked hate crime hoaxes. because these people are just lying and making this stuff up. They just make stuff up, man. Now, not every instance of hate is a hoax. Although I do think it's hilarious that, in the instance where Matt Walsh says 100% of the time, with no exceptions in recent memory, truth be told, I can't think of any story where it turned out to be legitimate that somebody went and sprayed something racist. Well, I suppose in their world, putting up signs that say it's okay to be white counts. Sure. But the reality is, I think we have to point out, if somebody goes and spray paints something racist and it doesn't make the news and it was just some dumb kid who got caught, because I think there was a story where some kids chalked swastikas or something, and it was a couple white kids who did it. I think, stories like that aren't as prominent and don't get called out because they're not because there's nothing to expose. It's like some dumb kid did some dumb thing is not a big story. Someone does engage in a hoax, and then everyone wants to talk about it. That being said, I do think the overwhelming majority of these stories, if not, 99.9%, I don't want to be absolute, were hoaxes. Do people care? I wonder. Defiant L's. This is the if you're not familiar with Defiant L's, you should definitely check them out on Instagram and Twitter. The Boston Celtics tweeted, "Our MA State Lottery hero among us is a force to be reckoned with. An activist who fights for her community, Monica Gannon Grant's efforts helped to spearhead initiatives to prevent violence, programs to feed families in need of marches to support Black Lives Matter." Then you have, about 2 years later, 18-count fraud conspiracy indictment. Yeah, her and her husband were transferring money from the nonprofit to them without notifying other members, apparently, allegedly, spending money on expensive dinners and things for themselves. And surprise, surprise. Take a look at that other, BLM organizer who has multiple houses. Take a look at the expose that, I think it was the Examiner. They went to the BLM address and nobody was there. Nothing was there. And no one knows where the money is. So BLM was forced to shut down national donations. Let me just say, man, you're being manipulated. You're being lied to. Now, maybe you and I know this, but how can this country survive if we live in a country with 80 plus million people who believe it no matter how many times they're lied to? I don't know, man. I just don't know. But what I can tell you is, take care of yourself and take care of your community. Think about what you need. Think about what your community needs. You've got to put on your own oxygen mask before putting on the mask of others. But we also have to make sure we are thinking about community and culture. So these people may be a problem, but at this point, I'm wondering, maybe we won't get some kind of great civil war or even peaceful divorce. Maybe it won't be a divorce. It'll just be dissolution. And what I mean by that is divorce is more formal. It's like, okay, we agree to separate. No, maybe one day people just stop talking to each other. Start focusing more on their local communities. I don't know. But stay strong, Do your thing. Take care of yourself. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all next time.